Good evening. Often dubbed the Mandela of the Maldives, he was the first democratically elected president of the Maldives, winning an election in 2008, becoming the first man to be elected democratically in the Maldives, sweeping away power of 30 years of one-man rule. He was later ousted in 2012. Living in exile in London and Sri Lanka, we have here with us President Mohamed Nasheed, joining us in discussion.
Thank you very much and good evening.
President Nasheed, when we look at your life ever since your return from Liverpool after marine studies, we see that you've continually, and there has been a pattern of you going to jail, coming back to politics, being a journalist, writing. Let's look back at your life ever since.
Well, yes, after I came back from university, I went to the Maldives and I started a small magazine. This was in 1989. The government didn't like what I was writing. I was also writing, I would try and place an article in newspapers here at that time. Gamini Veerakun very nicely would have me, and I would write, for instance, in the island as well, and also in Lanka Guardian. Marvin De Silva was editing the Lanka Guardian at that time. And through their assistance and through their encouragement, I found the strength to keep writing. And of course, with a lot of people in the Maldives as well, encouraging me to keep on writing. We mostly wrote about human rights and corruption and governance. Then we were deregistered. The whole of the editorial was arrested with 270 people. And I spent a very long time in solitary confinement after that, 18 months in solitary, with my editor. I was an assistant editor at that time and a columnist writing for it. And then we were incarcerated for another 2 years, but then they released me. And then I wrote again, and then they arrested me again. And then this pattern, I would write, they would arrest, and I would write, and they would arrest, and it went on and on and on. And later on, I got married to Laila. Mind you, Laila also got arrested in the first instance. And then we also had Meera in between, our first child, and then Zaya, our second child. So it was difficult, but still very, very difficult to leave home all the time and be absent from children, from family. Later on, family came in late 90s. And then finally I thought maybe perhaps if I got elected, I might be safer. They might not arrest me all the time. So I contested for a seat in Malé, capital, that's where I come from. And I was fortunate to have won it. And, but I was very wrong. I got elected and then we wanted to start a political party in Parliament, but our constitution didn't allow that at that time.
But if I may also quote you, I think you said entering politics, you thought you'll have the security and safety. But it seems that since 1990s, you haven't realized the safety and security you wanted.
Well, it was completely wrong thinking. I felt that becoming an MP would give you some form of security. But no, what happened was I became a greater threat perhaps. And therefore they started targeting me and focusing on me far more than before. Yes, it failed badly and by becoming an MP. But I was able to work and serve the people of Malé and the people of the Maldives as an MP for about 1.5 years, 2 years, close to 2 years. But then I was arrested again and removed from my seat. And then in 2004, 3-4, round about then, torture and ill treatment had become so bad in Maldives, in our jails. a young boy of 19 called Ivan Nasim. He was beaten to death. And then his body was brought to the hospital to be buried. And the doctor refused to give a death certificate, give the police a death certificate on this boy. And then finally this became a very big issue, and then there were riots in Male, and again there were mass arrests. The government declared emergency rule, and I fled. I was arrested as well, but in the confusion of it, I was able to go, and I fled Male, and we came to Colombo, and we formed a political party in exile in Sri Lanka. And then again we were chased. We found it unsafe to be here because the government kept on pursuing us, the government of the Maldives. And so I left to England, and then I sought asylum in England. And then after a while again I came back to Sri Lanka. After exile in England and Sri Lanka, we were able to galvanize we were able to run the party from exile. We were able to increase membership. We were able to galvanize the people for political activism. We were able to amend the constitution and allow for political pluralism. So finally I went back to the Maldives from Sri Lanka. And then suddenly our little party that we formed in exile became the biggest political party in the Maldives. And we contested the 2008 elections, and we were fortunate to have won that.
But in 2012 you were ousted. Let's talk a little about your jail term, President Nasheed.
Well, you know, jail is never nice. It's never good. It's never pleasant. It's always hard. It's always difficult. It's a challenge. It's a trial. So, you know, it's never pleasant. I've been tortured twice, so it's not a nice thing to talk about, actually.
But you are determined to run for office, to be re-elected at the upcoming elections.
Well, you see, the people of the Maldives must be able to choose the candidates of their choice and the leaders of their choice. President Yamin, since he came to government, has arrested every single opposition leader, including myself. He's also purged his own party, arresting his vice president to start with, and then his own brother. And he's going on and on, his nephews and his nieces. And he has completely suppressed all the political parties. He has also dismantled the Supreme Court. He has arrested the Chief Justice. He has arrested a further judge. And he has completely dismantled the judiciary. He has gone and entered the parliament with troops and occupied the parliament. The independent institutions are not independent. He has declared martial law. He really has overrun the state. We cannot give up, and we must not give up. I know this is a fight against odds. We've always fought against the odds. And we will keep at it, and I believe we will succeed. We will be able to beat President Yamin in the upcoming elections, in the forthcoming elections. I have no doubt whatsoever about that.
But what if President Yamin and his government does not stand up to the results of the election?
Well, we've seen similar situations in South Asia, in Asia. And when the numbers swell, when the momentum runs, when it is fast moving, it's difficult. It's difficult. Already President Yamin doesn't have the confidence of the security forces. He is protected by a deep state within the state of the Maldives, a radicalist Islamic state. He doesn't have the support of the rank and file of the military or the police. Very often, a lot of the top brass, as well as rank and file, are in conversation with us. And I can't see them taking his side and overrunning an election. I don't think that would happen. And I don't think it's possible to happen. I think the people of the Maldives also would have a say at that instance.
But he's in power.
But we all are, at one point or another, someone is in power and then suddenly you lose power. It takes a fraction of a second. When things fall down, they all come down crashing very rapidly and very quickly.
President Nasheed, now you were expected to leave to the Maldives in May, and you were quoted earlier during an interview as saying that you would wait for your daughter's exams to be over.
It's going. She has a history exam today.
So we're expecting.
We're expecting presidential elections, hopefully, as soon as possible. And we want to have a conversation with President Yamin. No doubt we must have a conversation with President Yamin. And we must find an amicable solution. We can't afford this. This is what is happening in the Maldives. It's far bigger than President Yamin or me. It's far bigger. The economy of the Maldives is in dire straits. Income is falling, prices are rising, tourist arrivals are falling, fish price is falling, GDP growth is falling, and we are having difficulties. At the same time, we are in debt and we are going into a huge debt trap. We are going into a Chinese debt trap and we will not be able to get out of it soon.
President Nasheed, I think you were talking about the Chinese influence in the Maldives. I think this is very relevant for all of us in South Asia. Don't you think developments from China could uplift the economy of the Maldives? Because part of the Maldives, apart from the tourism sector, is very much in poverty.
A lot of concrete is not necessarily development. Without firing a single shot, China has grabbed more land than the East India Company had done at the height of the colonial era throughout the world. I think the World Bank figure goes to 27 Sri Lankas, the size of. How this is achieved is, first you remove democratic oversight by weaponizing corruption, by buying up parliaments, by bribing judges, by getting political leaders arrested, by making you rogue in a sense, by making the country rogue. And then you remove democratic oversight only to get unsolicited contracts. Once you have an unsolicited contract, they increase the price of it by billions, by many, many factors. So let's say, for instance, a bridge in the Maldives is, a bridge between Malé and Hulule is $76 million. When we were in government, we had a quotation from a number of people, it didn't go beyond $80 million. Now they're building apparently that for $300 million. And for that $300 million, the government of Maldives has given a sovereign guarantee to the Chinese Exim Bank, to an asset that is actually only $100 million in value. So you would never be able to pay it back. And then when you can't pay it back, they ask for equity, and with equity, we relinquish sovereignty and land. Now, there is nothing wrong with foreign direct investments. I am a center-right politician, and we are all for foreign direct investments. But this is not foreign direct investment. This is devious and it is planned. And we must understand it and we must say it. I am very, very glad that Prime Minister Mahathir is saying exactly the same. This is another wave of colonialism.
What would you do different if you come back to power?
Well, it's not easy. It's not easy. I understand that. It's easy to identify it. It's easy to say it. These are sovereign contracts, after all. And you can't just walk away from it. But we would want to talk to China.
But does that mean you would pull out of these contracts? For example, in Sri Lanka, as you know, the Port City project, that was a project that came under major scrutiny, and it also led to severe complications later on. But will the Maldives have to face such complications if you plan to pull out of these deals?
Well, bigger countries must understand that they can't use debt as a leverage. They can't use debt as a disciplining agent. And you can't take a country into that kind of ransom. And I think, that's not commercial. That's a human rights issue. That's an issue of suppression. So you don't deal with this only as a contract. I think there are other institutions that you can have deliberation upon what is happening. What is exactly happening in the Maldives is land grab. And that's not foreign direct investments. And so, a solution to this must come with that kind of framework.
Does this also mean, President Nasheed, that you would seek international influence in the Maldives or support to sort out these matters?
We would seek China's support to sort out these matters. And I think people of China and the Chinese premier and the government must understand that they can't keep on doing this. They can't be propping up dictatorships. They can't be getting unsolicited contracts. They can't be jacking up prices. They can't be getting sovereign guarantees for unrealistic amounts. And they can't be seeking and asking for money in return. You can't be asking for your pound of flesh with not a single drop of blood. You can't be doing that.
India will also want a bigger role to play in the Maldives as they do. If you come back to power, how will India-Maldives relations be?
We've always lived India as our big neighbor, and India has never we've never seen India as an occupying force or a country that wants to occupy. And we've had amicable relations with India for generations, for hundreds of years. I think we should follow, we should understand Indian sentiments. We should be aware of their safety and their security and their concerns. And we must build a foreign policy based on that. We've argued for an India-first foreign policy. I think it's only real that we must be mindful about it. I think other countries, especially China, also should be mindful about it. They should not wedge us, sandwich us in the middle, and have, take Indian Ocean into a Cold War. This should not happen. But there is a Cold War brewing in the Indian Ocean, and I think Indian Ocean islands have a big obligation to make sure that there is peace and stability in the Indian Ocean.
However, the present government in the Maldives accuses you of bringing international powers, Western powers, into internal affairs to decide the fate and the future of the Maldives. And they feel that the security of the Maldives and the region will be compromised as a result.
Well, I think, we live in an interrelated, interdependent world. And the kind of views and ideas of sovereignty as xenophobic ideas of sovereignty is not necessarily our viewpoint. We are in international contracts. We have joined the United Nations. We have conceded to a number of conventions, UN conventions, and we must live up to it. I think, in the family of the world, of nations, if just one country, big or small, starts running around outside the game plan, then of course things go wrong. President Yamin must understand that money laundering is not acceptable. But he has used our national accounts to launder huge amounts of funds coming from all sorts of shady places. We've had in the last 3-4 years, 26 murders, all unresolved. It's very clear that this was the hand of the deep state. Radical Islamists have in the Maldives positioned themselves in strategic positions in the institutions, very often in strategic institutions. And they are able to have a stronger hold on our society, on how criminal justice is worked. And therefore there is impunity on anyone who they want to back. This is very, very sad, and this is very worrying. We have these two main issues: A, the Chinese debt trap, and B, the deep state. Now, so as I try to point out time and time again, these elections in the Maldives are far bigger than just President Yamin and myself, or the 500,000 people in the Maldives. We occupy the best navigable parts of the Indian Ocean. We are a big ocean state. We are not a small island state. We are, our economic area is as big as Saudi Arabia.
But in terms of regional security and integration, how do you think the Maldives should move forward?
Well, I think we should have closer ties with Sri Lanka. When we were in government, we wanted to have easy currency convertibility. Look, for instance, Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka would make about $2 billion of receipts from the Maldives a year, and which is all very good. From your profit repatriations from resorts, just close to 15 to 20% of Maldives resorts are actually owned by Sri Lankan companies. So there is a good profit repatriation. There's a good expatriate skilled labor, and there is good money therefore coming out from that. And there is normal trade. So all in all, our biggest trading partner is Sri Lanka. We have, Colombo is our biggest town outside of Male. We have about 40,000 Maldivians living in Sri Lanka. We had relied upon Sri Lanka all our lives to build a nation, to run a nation. And I think it would be in the interest of both countries to have more closer association, more closer friendship and economic ties. So that's the direction that we should be going. We should be also, these huge ideas of bigger projects, the special economic zone projects and mega projects. I think we should have economic policies that tries to increase household incomes. I think we should have economic policies that articulates the household as the engine of development. Not your big, huge economic development towns and cities and special economic zones and bigger, mega things.
In Mali, how possible is it to do that? Half of the population is in poverty.
And the poverty line is not as harsh as it used to be. No one is not eating in the Maldives. Everyone is, fed. I think we shouldn't kind of go to that down that road and down that picture. Growth is good. At least people are able to make ends meet. We get per capita is about 12,000. Of course, there is $12,000 a year. Of course, there is an issue of fair distribution of that 12,000. But we do now have a proper taxation system. We need to bring in income tax. And we have a good social protection program. We have free health care. We have a we have a health insurance scheme that was brought in by our government. We have a housing scheme, housing program that was brought in through our government. We have a connectivity program, a transport system that was also brought in through our government. So, Maldives is a viable state. And we have been a viable state for the last many thousands of years. And I think we can be stronger. We are resilient. We are resilient to tourism shocks. We've had a number of shocks in the past. Tourism is about 40-50 years old in the Maldives. And we are quick at bouncing back as well.
I think, President, you called a cabinet meeting underwater during your presidency. This created awareness world over on the threats to low-lying nations as yours. We'll talk a little on the issues surrounding climate change and small nations as the Maldives and action that larger countries can take to affect and protect smaller nations as Sri Lanka, the Maldives.
Well, thank you. I mean, I think there's no doubt that everyone is a believer now. Climate change is happening, and it's happening now. There might be some skeptics still, but it's very, very obvious. The rains are not coming at the times that it used to. The floods are stronger than the last year. The summers are hotter, winters are colder, sea level waves are bigger, winds are stronger. There's a whole host of climate aberrations, and no one can now deny that. Can we save the planet? Can we still save the planet? I believe we can. I believe that there is a low carbon development strategy that would give you the same economic outcomes as your received economics. I think, for instance, let's say energy, electricity. In any given instance now, solar panels are cheaper than fossil fuel. Recently, a coal bid, a power bid in India, the renewable tender actually beat the coal bid. And so, renewable energy, the economics has decided that this is a far cheaper form of energy. We should bring this environment issue to become an economic issue, not only just an ethical human rights or lovely issue, but it must be brought to a proper economic argument. And I think we can now come out with proper economic arguments. And I think it's quite possible to find another development strategy that would involve less extraction, more recycling, and that would involve less burning fossil fuels and all the other things that we do that would be detrimental to environment. Now, for instance, in the Maldives, this, not necessarily only in Maldives, there are many countries who have enough dry land, but still goes on pumping land from 30 meters below and keep on making islands. Right. There is a natural progression, there is a natural way of development. And I think if you go against the natural grain of things, you would be, whatever development that you achieve would not be sustainable, and that will not be development. You will be able to raise your incomes. You will be able to reach full employment. You will be able to have your social protection programs, but through different strategies. And it's completely possible now to come up with these strategies. You do not have to be bogged down with the technology of the 40s and 50s, and also the economic thinking of the 40s and 50s. I think there is a new economic. I am convinced that there is a new economics available, and I think it is quite possible to still turn around and save the planet, coming out with this new economic thinking. It's very encouraging that Sri Lanka has these views, and they are going forward, for instance, in their renewable plans, in their recycling plans, and it is encouraging. It is encouraging. When we signed, we became the first. We said in 2009, when the Maldives said that we were going to become carbon neutral in 2020, everyone said we were mad, thought we were mad. But now, 10 years later, more than 47 countries had signed up to become carbon neutral. Paris Agreement became possible only because price of renewables fell. It has become an economic arm. The fifth largest economy of the world is California, and it is now driven on solar power. The fifth largest economy of the world is no one else, California. So there is a clear economic argument to this. I think it's possible. When we come into elections this year, we would be bringing in a blue manifesto, an island life, a sustainable life, and less extraction and more recycling, and more renewable.
So does this mean going forward, the election would see a lot of manifestos and pledges in terms of environment-friendly society?
Well, you see, what I'm trying to suggest is the pledges would still be full employment. We will give you a job. We will build your road. We will do your sewages. We will build you a house. We will give you better education, better healthcare, better transport. But it would be through another strategy. It won't be through your standard measures, standard prescriptions. So, because there is enough science available now. There is enough technology available now. There are methods available now, and we must now bring it into a manifesto, come out with a strategic action plan, draw out a legislative agenda, and come out with the tender notices. So we can have a proper planet B.
Right. You're very popular in Sri Lanka, President Nasheed, and I think in Sri Lanka too. The present government came on the back of promises of good governance and also a budgetary promises of a blue-green economy. But how effective these measures have been is a question within our society. And for you going forward, how will you ensure that these your pledges will be effective? Will the ordinary Maldivian trust these pledges, especially because the pattern we spoke about at the beginning? Will the present government allow election results if you do win? These are questions that I think we should address at closer to the end of this program. We have a few minutes to go, but I'd like your opinion.
Well, firstly, in 2008, we came out with 5 specific pledges. We don't do a whole list of it. We just focus on 5 things, and we did them. When we came into government revenue was 7 billion. Because we didn't have a tax system when we came into government. There was no profit tax, there was no income tax, there still is no income tax, and there is no sales tax on goods. So we brought in a whole taxation system, and we were able to therefore come out with a social protection program that gave free education, free healthcare and housing, and also an old age pension, or another allowance for single mothers and orphans. So we were able to lay out a whole social protection program because we were able to bring out a taxation system. Now, I believe that the people of the Maldives would believe us. We have delivered, and we will deliver. And I also think that you are a little bit harsh on Sri Lanka, on your own government. This country has gone through a bloody civil war for over 25 years. And it has had its impact all throughout the world and South Asia and the Maldives. And it's still fragile. And, look, tell us a country that has gone through such civil wars and had democratic elections and had change of government peacefully. Look at all the countries in South America. All these countries that has had many civil conflicts and civil wars. But Sri Lanka has remained intact, and its democratic institutions have survived. Of course, there's a whole lot more that you could do. But I think I'm happy. Of course, I'm not a voter here, but if we would be dished out even this amount, we would be as happy, we would be over the moon. So, of course, Sri Lankans would want your politicians to do better, and I'm sure they will do better. But in the Maldives, we need a lot more.
Mm-hmm. And talking about your pledges going forward, President, how would your relationships internationally be? I think if we can focus on your ties with the Western powers and also regional countries, you did mention earlier on that Chinese projects, you would revisit them. Let's talk a little about that. And will your family be happy about you back in politics?
No, well, I mean, they can't be happy. They can't be happy. But of course, they know what I'm doing, and they strongly believe in what I'm doing. My eldest daughter Meera is in university, and my youngest daughter is doing O-levels, and my wife Laila. It's very harsh on them. It's hard on them, and they won't be happy. But they do believe what I am doing. Our relationship, we must get into the Commonwealth. President Yamin left the Commonwealth. He actually absconded from the Commonwealth. The Commonwealth came to penalize him, and he absconded. So I hope that the Commonwealth Secretary General and the member countries and Her Majesty would understand that Maldives must be in the Commonwealth of Nations, and that's one of the first things that we must do in government. And also, of course, SARC. What do we do with it? Is it a functioning body? Can it be made functioning? I think there is a strong need for it. We must, South Asian leaders, South Asian countries must sit down at least once a year. And we had a SARC summit in the Maldives when we were in government, and I think it helped us and it helped everyone a lot. And I think so, with our India First policy, we don't want to be we're not against China. No one should have that kind of view. But what we are saying is, this is what we see. So let's just make it better. And I believe we could talk to everyone, and I believe we can have solutions and we can win.
Finally, this is something I've been asking throughout the discussion. Now government says you will not contest for election, although you're very much determined.
Well, you see, the Supreme Court of the Maldives have decided that I can contest. The UN has decided, UN Working Group on Arbitrary Detention has decided, the Human Rights Council has decided, a number of other multinational organizations, NGOs, a number of other human rights NGOs and so on. Locally it's been decided, internationally it's been decided, and I hope that the international community would impress upon President Yamin the need for an inclusive election, a fair election in the Maldives. If not, we are doomed.
Thank you very much, President Nasheed, for your time with us on Other Derana 24/7.
Thank you very much.
Well, as I said before, he's an icon for action against climate change, an international icon, and he has also been a figurehead for the promotion of human rights and democracy in Islamic states. Of course, he did reveal his plans to contest for presidential elections. During earlier this year, he did reveal his plans, and we are hoping to keep you updated on the latest developments in the Maldivian archipelago. Thank you for joining us on the program. Have a pleasant evening. Good night.